Hello everyone, welcome to this second video on Python. In the first video, we have seen how we can do some basic arithmetic operations in Python just to start with the idea of coding and what are the different data types and what are the different data structures available in Python. In this video, we will see how we can read CSV and Excel files, which are the most common file types that you'll be using while doing any data analysis. To read a CSV file, we'll be using a function read underscore CSV from pandas. And if you look at the documentation here, it has many arguments, but the most important one is the file path, where you mention the location of the file from where you are actually reading it. And then there are other arguments which you can actually skip if the file is in a proper format. Otherwise, we may have to use a few of those arguments to read the data properly. So some of the important arguments are mentioned here in this cell: file path, separator, delimiter, header, names, like that. So let's read a file which is already available in my environment here. So before doing that, I'll load pandas as a PD. So that is why this line of a statement code is very important. Import pandas as PD. So this is how we load any library. Now, if you see in this code chunk, there are many different ways in which I've read the file. But because this file is kind of proper format, so if I don't use any argument as well, I should be able to read it properly. So if I look at the first few rows here, using this function head, I can observe the top few rows. So the number of rows, I can mention it here as an argument in this function. So I'm trying to read actually, so 100 rows here. Okay. So it is showing 1 to 10, and then I can actually see the other 10 set of data set by using this. Okay. So if I look at the first 10 rows, it looks fine. So by default, if I just give the path name for this particular file, it is working fine. But it may happen in some cases that you don't have any header or the header is not proper. You want to assign the header name yourself, or the first few rows are blank, then you may use this argument skip rows to actually skip a few rows in the data set. And you may use this argument header equal to none to not read the header. Okay, so if I do this and if I run the cell again, let's see how the data looks like. So now the data is read properly. The first row, which was header, is skipped, and I'm saying don't infer the header. Okay, so it has just given the column names as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. Also, in some cases, you may not want to read complete data set. You just want to read a few lines of data only, just to check the data, or maybe only for a particular number of rows only is important for your analysis. So here I'm reading just 5 rows, and this I mentioned by this argument in rows. And if I look at the data set here, so even though I have mentioned 100 rows, because 100 rows of data is not read, the output has only 5 rows of data set. Now, if you want to change the column names, so you already have a header there, so you skip that first row I'm just reading 5 rows again here for comparison. And I have mentioned that these would be the name of the columns in the data frame which I am going to create. So if I read this and if I look at the output here, this is how it looks like. So the column names have changed and now it is ABCD like that. And in some cases, when you are reading a CSV file, you may not be able to read it properly, then you may have to change this encoding argument. So I have encountered this a few times. So if I do it as encoding equal to UTF-8, it will read properly. And it may happen in your case, you may have to change the encoding argument as well. So it may not be UTF-8 only. You may have to add something else as well. So here, because the file is in proper format, the encoding is also UTF-8 only. So that's why it's working fine here. Now, how do we write any data frame back as a CSV file on our system? It's very simple. So before doing that, I'll actually read it again, just using the first argument, the file path argument, and let's observe how it looks like. So this is fine. Now this the data is present in this data frame sleep, and I have to write it back to a CSV file. So I'll be using this function dot to underscore CSV, which I'll just add it to my data frame. So it would be sleep dot to underscore CSV, and I mention the name of the file to be written. So here it is sleep underscore CSV written dot CSV, and this argument index equal to false. So what it does is that it will not create another column in your data set, which would be just index values. So for example, if you keep index equal to true here, it will write these as a separate column as well, 0 1 2 3 4 5 6. So generally we don't use that, so we'll write index equal to false. In some cases, maybe with time series data, if your index is the date itself or the date time itself, then you would like to actually write the index as well, because it's not present in your data set as a separate column. So there it becomes useful. There is another file format which you may encounter in your daily life, in your professional life, that is tab separated file. So you can read it in the similar way using pandas read underscore table function. Only difference is that you will have to actually mention the separator argument to be a tab, which is mentioned by the back slash and t. And here I'm reading only the first 5 rows. And if I look at the output here, it is showing me the results properly. Now, another most common used file format would be Excel, and most of the arguments are quite similar to read underscore CSV, except that you have to mention the sheet name as well. So, sheet name in Excel, you may have different sheets in which you will have the data, and you would like to read one sheet or two sheet at a time. So, you may want to read a few sheets at a time or just a single sheet. So generally we read only one sheet at one point of time. So if you look at the documentation here, these are the set of arguments, but the important ones are mentioned here: the seat name, which is the first argument after file name that you need to use. So by default it would be 0, it would read the first sheet only. But yeah, if you mention a particular sheet, it will read that sheet. And you can actually mention a list as well in this argument. So what it will do is that it will read the first, because here indexing start with 0, the first sheet, second sheet, and the fifth sheet, and it would be a dictionary of data frame. So first sheet will be one data frame, second sheet will be one data frame, third sheet will be another data frame, and they all be actually added in a dictionary, to a dictionary as name value pair. Okay, so let's read this file. So I'm here, it is mentioned sheet name equal to 0, and I'm reading the first 5 rows, and it is the first sheet in this data from Kaggle Excel file. So I've created an Excel file with some sample data sets from Kaggle, and then the first sheet actually had the sleep data set only. So if you see, it has this data set which is quite similar to the one which we have seen earlier as an when we read those CSV or TSV files. If I change the sheet name to 1, and I'm assuming that I'm reading the same sleep file, then I'm actually, it's not correct. So if you look at the first few rows here, it is something different. So it has actually the player details from IPL, so their base price, their winning bid, and the year. And if I read the another sheet, which is the third sheet here, then it has again some another different kind of data set. So if you see the output here, it is some shopping related data set, okay, which I have used in one of the my videos on Google Sheet. So while reading an Excel file, it may happen that you want to actually read only a few columns. So we have seen that earlier as well in actually in read underscore CSV as well. There would be some argument where you actually want to read a particular column. Okay. So if I look at this, okay, so here actually using this use columns, you can select a few columns here in this function, read underscore CSV as well. And similarly, it is available here in read underscore Excel as well. Okay. So while doing that use columns, here we have mentioned that we want to read only the first, second, and third columns from this data set. So if you see, there are multiple columns here, but when this argument is used, use columns, only the first 3 columns are being used. You can actually read some other columns as well. It may not be in the sequence only. So if I do it like this, 015, and if I read it again, see the fifth column, the fifth 5 number here actually will represent the sixth column. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So purchase amount is read here. If you want to write the same data frame back on your system as an Excel file, you would use 2 underscore Excel here with the name of the file to be written and the file type at the end. And you'd also mention index equal to false if you don't want to write in the index column separately. So that's how the files will be written and you can access it on your system. So if you see the files present here, all the files that I have read and written, it's available here along with the notebook. That's why the file path while reading or writing the file is just the name of the file. If I want to read files from the other location, I'll have to give a detailed file path as the first argument while reading and writing the file. Okay. So I hope you find this video useful. Do like the video and subscribe my channel.